Hey, badass listeners. Welcome back to Midlife Strategies for Badass Women. Today, I have the profound honor of introducing Marie Cruz. For more than 15 years, Marie has guided and empowered women through immense growth and transformation. She is a certified grief guide, an empowerment life coach, and the best selling author of Even When She Rose. After the sudden tragic loss of both her mother and her 22-year-old son, Marie refused to let grief define her. Instead, she leaned into resilience and developed the Nautilus Way, Write Your Way Free, a proven journaling process that helps women rewrite limiting beliefs and heal deep trauma. She is here today to share her incredible journey, teach us how to validate ourselves, and show us how to walk ourselves back home. So let's get started. You're listening to Midlife Strategies for Badass Women, the no BS podcast for women over 40 who are sick of playing by someone else's rules. I'm your host, Sue Willoughby, badass midlife strategist, truth teller, and professional fire starter for midlife reinvention. Around here, we don't do fluff. We do real talk, bold strategies, and badass breakthroughs. Because midlife isn't a crisis, it's your damn power move. If you're all in, unapologetic, and ready to reinvent, let's get started. Hello, badass listeners. Welcome back to another episode of Midlife Strategies for Badass Women. Today, as I said in my introduction, my guest is Marie Cruz, and she is here to talk about all things about overcoming grief and trauma and how to get beyond that and live a fulfilling life. So, Marie, welcome to the stage.
Thank you so much for inviting me and just for holding this space. I think we all can grow together.
I love that. Yeah. So I'd love to know a little bit about why you are called to do this kind of work for women, especially. I know a little bit about your background, but I would love for you to share that with my audience, if you don't mind, how you got into this work.
All right. Jump right in. I think it was 2012, I left a corporate job to go into my own business of health and wellness coaching. And, mostly directed towards physical health, but then understanding how everything ties into your physical health. And I coached for about 5 years or so. I had a huge national team. It was kind of my pocket, the thing that I was really good at, that I enjoyed, and very fulfilling. And I had my own weight struggles. So it was perfect. And then in early 2016, I lost my mother unexpectedly to a heart condition and found her. So there was some PTSD that went with that. It was also my first brush with just great grief. I had lost people, but no one close enough that it affected the workings of my life. But this was, another animal altogether. So it was kind of my training ground, if you will, for big grief. And I handled her estate, which wasn't vast. It wasn't a lot, but it was still, there's 4 of us, and I handled it. So I came kind of face to face with what happens in these situations. What do you do? Who do you call? The 5 million things you have to do and call. And that process really I had never really struggled with depression. I had ongoing anxiety probably most of my life, but that pulled me in a darker space where I felt the depletion of grief in a heavy way. And so I naturally I knew the ways to take care of myself. So I quickly started forcing myself to create serotonin in my body. I was very aware, um,
Mm-hmm.
and it took me about, I would say, maybe 8 to 10 months before I remember I doing posts on Facebook saying, okay, I feel more like myself. Like I feel like this this impact I've managed. I've come up from it and began to really grow that business some more and continue on that trajectory. And then, so from that was in like March 2016 when that happened. And then so kind of get myself together, let's call it that. And, say within a year. And I'm going along and things are great. And I'm hitting these milestones in my company. And I'm pretty much on the top of my world in the sense like I'm carrying this grief, I'm dealing with it. And then, so I ended up earning a big trip to Sundance for a big training with all the, kind of big wigs in the company. And I went. And the very next weekend, when I got back, my son took his own life. He was
Hmm.
22, and it was extremely unexpected. I've since met a lot of mothers who have battled their children's attempts and things like that. It wasn't the case. It wasn't like my son was fine. I mean, he had struggled, but there was never an indicator that this was a risk or, and my background's in psychology. So all the things to look for weren't present. I've learned an enormous amount about all things in that, I don't want to call it a category, but you know, so it's mostly a stigma until it's not.
Mm-hmm.
So, so going through that, although I had this other brush with grief and very recent, it was, I mean, not even in the same ballpark. Um, and I hate, it's not comparison or quantifying. I would say it's impact. The way that it permeates every single thing that you do in your life. Like, if you have children, like you think about them more than you're ever thinking about your parents. You think about them more than you think about your spouse, even. Like, they just anyhow. So the impact was, I mean, beyond anything that what I had learned or was able to process could manage. So it was like, round 2 or 3 or 10 of who am I? How do you go about even unraveling this? Um, so yeah, that's where all of this kind of got started.
Yeah.
Um,
That is a lot of grief to process in a relatively short period of time, losing your
yes.
mom and then a couple years later, your son. And I've had several women on here who have lost their children in their 20s for one reason or another, whether it be illness, suicide, whatever it was. And it's, like you said, something that, we're never prepared for death. uh, regardless of who it is, but especially, your children, because you
No.
don't expect to outlive them, I guess,
No.
is what I'm trying to say.
Sure.
And so, yeah, I mean, that's a lot to overcome. And um, you're already doing coaching. You had coached yourself, it sounds like, back, um, or were working your way back from your mother's passing. And now you're dealing with your son.
Yeah.
And like you said, that's a completely different level of grief, and not comparison, but just a completely different level of
Sure.
grief. And how did you start to put the pieces back together?
So in maybe the year before my mom had passed, it was a year before my mom had passed. My daughter was in college. I had my kids fairly young. And so my daughter was in college, and she gave me this book called The Artist's Way,
Mm-hmm.
by Julia Cameron. And it pushed me down this path of going inward through journaling. Now, I'd always been a journaler, meaning here and there, as a kid, I loved to write, and I showed up into the world fairly introspective. So journaling was like, getting a window into my inner thoughts. And so that came fairly naturally to me. And I realized after now working with hundreds of women that it's not very natural to most people.
Uh-huh.
But I had started this daily habit of journaling before I lost my mom. So I learned that it was a place that I could go to whenever I needed to, because the world is not really structured to hold grief. People are afraid of grief, as was I
Uh-huh.
before I went through these two huge losses. I'm sure I said the worst things, like all the things wrong. Um, but I had this journaling process that I had already put in place. So it was like this way I could just go and meet myself, and whatever I was processing, dealing with the grief, I could talk to my mom if I needed to. I could, walk. I always say it's like walking myself home or through, so it doesn't require someone else's presence or patience or understanding. And I just instinctively began to process that grief through that avenue. Now, I had a therapist, and I would, but I had gone so far in therapy, I was kind of like, at some point, how to work through things. And
Mm-hmm.
so I just used journaling after losing my mom. And then, and here's the thing, I was already journaling. So it wasn't, I didn't understand. It wasn't like I made sense of that. I just kept doing it, and it worked, and it
Yeah.
helped. And so I kept doing it. And there were women in my life that I talked to that had lost their mothers. And, my mom and I had not a bad relationship, but not a very close relationship. And so we were just,
I can relate to that.
we were just like entirely different human beings, like so vastly
Yeah.
different. And
Mm-hmm.
so that kind of set the stage, or an environment that was conducive to healing. And it was in the privacy of my home, and it was limitless.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there were times where the journal didn't work and wasn't good enough. And I'm an outward processor. So sometimes I needed just to talk. But so when I lost my son, Quentin, it took me a while to go back to my journal because I knew exactly how much I would find myself on the page, and I didn't want to. Or maybe
Mm.
I was just afraid. Gosh, it's so wild when these emotions come up. Um, I think I was just, because I'm like seeing her, right? I was just afraid, I think, of seeing myself and being in that space with him. And
Mm.
and it's weird because it's not something you can escape anyway. Like but it wasn't like putting it right here in my face. So then yeah, so I just once I finally went to the journal again, it it was my healing space again. And it was y- you know, I had begun in the journaling processes that I had been practicing all this time, had begun to be hearing back from, let's call it, some people might say God, your higher self, the universe, whatever it is. At first, I thought it was a little woo woo. And then I thought, whatever outside of me is guiding me is just now talking to me, which was weird and wild. And I didn't tell anybody for a long time. But I truly didn't tell anybody for a long time. I was like, they're gonna lock me up or whatever. But after I lost
I
Quentin,
think that's
go ahead.
yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead. I was just thinking, I was thinking about getting downloads once when we open ourselves up in such a way that spirit, whatever you want to call it, is allowed to come in, and you start getting this information and you start getting these signs, and you're like, right? You're like, where's this coming from? What,
Right.
And then you can start to say, okay, there is something out there. There is something else guiding me, helping me, right? If you're open to it. So I understand what you're talking
Well,
about. It's not woo-woo. I mean, it might be a little woo-woo, but it's okay.
I had a really strong religious-based faith for most of my life. But even before I lost Quentin, I had kind of moved away from organized belief systems, but I always knew I was being guided. Like, I was sure of that. The framework in which I held it had already started to change. And so,
Yeah.
and then when I lost him, none of it worked. Like, none of it was big enough or clear enough. That's it, clear enough. None of it was clear enough for my nervous system to take a deep breath. And so I just began to explore. And because I had built that process already, it wasn't that far of a reach to allow him to talk to me. And even though I could, I didn't do it that much even. It was kind of, but he was talking to me otherwise, which also was, I never, ever in a million years believed those things. It's not that I didn't believe them. I didn't play in it. I didn't want to know. I wasn't interested in going to a medium to talk to my mom. I was like, whatever that is over there, it's real woo-woo.
It's over there.
It's
staying
real,
over there.
it's real woo-woo, and I'm not going to play with it. But when I lost him, there was something in me that was so desperate that I would have done anything to understand, So the journal then became an outlet for me to hear from him, for me to really, really accept where I was. I could be crying for 3 days on end and I could write about it, or I could say, okay, and then you can see a pattern, like, okay, and it's not linear at all. And losing my mom had taught me that, like, just because I had a good day today doesn't mean I'm going to have a good day tomorrow. But the journal I just kept returning to over and over. And it was almost like where I could hold my own hand and remind myself, and in some instances allow him to remind me what our relationship really was. Because when you losing your child is one thing, losing them because they made a decision to leave is its own, just, I want to say bad words. It's its own animal. It's a beast. And I could let him remind me of what our relationship really was and who I was to him, because in those moments you kind of question everything about who you were and like how'd you miss it, all the things. So I just went at that, and then about 18 months later I started I had always had a desire to run retreats, and don't ask me why. I had only been to one, and it was a business retreat, and I started to run. I still had this team, so I decided I'm going to run a retreat, and this was just personal development and mindset coaching, which I had been doing for years, right? So I just was like, I need to be creative. I need to do something. So I started running retreats, and in the first retreat, I wanted them to understand this journaling that I was doing, this way of walking yourself home, of walking yourself back to your own truth and your goodness. And, because we celebrate, we're taught to diminish our value and exalt or talk about all the ways we mess up, lest people think we're too confident or too whatever.
Right. As women, we should stay small.
Yes. Well, and it's even towards other women, right? Who does she think she is? That kind of thing. So my goal initially was just to bring the journaling process to them in this way so that they could get the benefits that I was getting in the deepest grief that arguably someone can go through. And in trying to do that a few times, realizing they're not getting it, like they weren't absorbing it.
Yeah. I was curious about that because you made a statement earlier about it came natural to you, the journaling, but most women either haven't been introduced to it or find it difficult or don't see the benefits in there. Why do you think that is?
Well,
I'm just curious to
no, it's okay. I
where
think
that
the
comes from.
biggest barrier that I deal with, and this is years of this now, the biggest barrier is a belief that you have to be naturally good at writing. That is the first thing that I probably hammer home the most. Like if you can write on a 4th grade level, you can use a journal as self-therapy. Literally. Because you don't have to be good at anything. You have to be willing. And that's it. And so that is the biggest hurdle. I think beyond that, it's just so not talked about, not, I imagine a world in which we're bringing this process to children in school and teaching them. So now we don't have women in their 40s and 50s trying to undo an entire lifetime of a mental chatter that's been talking you out of your greatness. And so that was the angst, or the driving factor was they're just not getting it. At no point did I sit around and say, let me create a process that I just thought they needed journal, like just do the thing. I didn't even realize that I was doing a process, that I didn't understand what I was doing. And so
is this the birth of the Nautilus Way?
It is. It is. Oh, I don't know if I was supposed to go there yet.
No, yeah, that's great. Well, I mean, yes, I mean, like you said, you didn't even realize that you were developing this process. You're just like, hey, journaling helps. I got to get you to understand that. How are we going to do that?
That's exactly what happened.
And what better way to have something developed out of an actual need, right? Then otherwise, other than, some people create these processes and these frameworks and then push them on people. And it's like, no, this, you don't understand. This is something people need this. So you found the need and you went for it. You're like, how do I make this happen?
Well, people kept saying, how are you doing this? Da, da, da. And I'm like, I'm in real time addressing my pain and for lack of a better term, saving myself, because I wasn't really using my therapist. I had given my therapist to my daughter, who was 25 at the time, and every fiber in my being was like, she's got to be okay. And we had subsequent losses back to back to back. So that hit her like really hard. And it wasn't just her brother. It was her long-term boyfriend and then her biological father. I mean, when I say within 9 months. So I was just like, here, I loved my therapist. He had been with me. I called him the night I lost my son. But I just said, here, you have him, because I knew she would connect with him. He was amazing. But, then there becomes this conflict. So I just wanted these women who I was mentoring, who were also stuck in entrepreneurship, to understand, hey, if this walks me through the death of my child, then you can use this to go in. Because, entrepreneurship is personal development on fire. And I will die on that hill. So, and I'm working with a bunch of entrepreneurial women. So eventually we had a retreat with just 2 ladies, and it was a small, one of them had requested it. And on this porch in Mississippi, we had gone to a cabin, and on the porch got birthed this process from me, not like that. It was like, okay, here's what we're going to do. Next, we're going to do this next. And we do these 4 steps. And after, I was like, there it is. There's the process. And that is how it was born. And
Yeah.
and so it's been a few years, and I have honed it, created an online program. But every retreat since, I have utilized that process as a baseline in all of my one-on-one work I do with clients. That is my baseline. That is what we utilize, so that we don't use a session digging around to see what's there. We are intentionally coming to the table with a specific thing that we've already addressed in a journal writing. And it's been kind of mind-boggling. Like, I still go like, I really, me? Like I wouldn't say imposter syndrome anymore because the evidence is there, but a lot of it is like, now I just understand I was just willing to allow this to come through me. Not, I don't know that that's entirely that unique or special, but I don't know. So.
Well, I think what you're saying, and it's so important, is that I know for me, like when I decided to quit drinking, I wrote about it every day, and I didn't go to AA. That's not my jam. It's just not. And I did it on my own, and I felt strong enough because I had done enough personal development work prior to that. But writing all those feelings that I had about that really helped. Like it just, like you said, it gets it out of your head, because otherwise they become these, looping tapes that you just get spun up on, and they take on a life of their own, and they pull you out of reality and keep you in your head and not in your body.
Sure.
And not in your life and not in the present. So, and it is intimidating to, like you said, I think a lot of women, it's also very vulnerable, even though you're doing it one-on-one, to write those things down, right? And just have them come out of you rather than being pushed down inside of you. And I don't know if that's your experience or if that's the experience of some of your retreat participants, but, speaking from, like when I was a teenager, when somebody gave me the Artist Way, and
Really?
it was intimidating to me, and I just wasn't, I wasn't connected. I didn't have that emotional intelligence at that point in my life and everything. And I'm like, oh, what do I write? What do I write? Like you said, like I felt like I had to write something meaningful or whatever, rather than just what was in me.
Sure.
And so it was an interesting journey, but yeah, so I totally get it. That it's not, it doesn't come easily, but there's much more talk about, obviously mindset and somatic healing and all of the things. And journaling is a big part of all of that. And I think people sometimes, they've either not had exposure to it, or they have, and they think it's like, ugh, just journal about it and you'll be fine.
Yeah, like
right?
Dear
Where they
Diary sort of thing.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And they kind of poo-poo it, and it's, don't fully understand the power that it can have.
Well,
and the healing power
what
that
I
it can
would
have.
say is, after, I don't even know how many retreats I've done or work I've done with clients, but we can, the feeling, the heaviness, it doesn't even show up when they release it. So I think I have a niece who's graduated from college, and I had her to watch the program online just for a different the word, this menopause demographic.
Sort of okay, yeah.
So I had her to watch the whole thing and do the exercises in the online, just to give me like a different feedback from a different age group. And also I know her well, and she is a pretty well-adjusted young lady, like a super loving home, very unusual upbringing, And so I wanted to know what she thought about it. So what she came back and she said, I've been journaling and I always feel like, what's the point? What's the point? And the evidence, what I see, is that getting it out, I always say this, getting it out is better than holding it in. Like better than nothing. But if you can get it out and do the reframing and the rewriting and the rewording, and then you can rewire, that is where the medicine's at. So what is the when I'm sitting with them, they can write and not there's hardly any emotion. But when we go through the whole process, the part that brings up the most emotion for women, that's all I really work with right now, but is validating themselves. That part is the most emotional piece. And I believe that it's because we live in a society that encourages us not to, and also because it's the least practiced thing. And then I'll follow that up and say, because in not validating who we are abandoning ourselves. And
So
self-abandonment.
tell me more about the validation process. So what does that look
So
like?
validating meaning, let me give you an example. So like if I'm going to write about my son, okay? And I'm just blah, right? I'm just getting it out of my body. And it may go, I'm going to talk about in the beginning. It might have gone somewhere along the lines of really berating myself for not seeing how much pain, or this was a big one for me. And this is really being angry with myself or angry at the universe, whatever, because I didn't heal sooner so that I couldn't teach him how to love himself sooner. And so that may be like, you're just ranting, getting it out. So the validation comes in when we can look at what we wrote and bring truth to it. And that is pretty difficult when you haven't practiced self-love. It's almost foreign, and many times it's almost wrong. I don't know how else to say it. Like in your body, it's wrong. Don't exacerbate your strengths. Don't pat yourself on the back. I mean, it's kind of sad to watch. So what happens is when that happens, when you show up for yourself, it's the most moving piece. It is the most healing. And, Byron Katie is one of my faves ever. And she says, she says, you're the one you've been waiting for. So the journaling process that I teach brings you back to you showing up for you validating who you are. So the validation, let's go back to the validation for me in the journal writing might be for either I allowed my son Quentin to help me to do this, or I was able on some level to do it for myself, which was to come back with the truth of like, no, I didn't heal in the way I wish I would have, in the way I at the time was believing would have made a difference. But I went to therapy all through my 20s, through my first husband who was a crack addict. I mean, I was in the work my whole life, and I get credit for that, whether it feels like it was enough or not. And as I could give that to myself, there's something magical that happens in our bodies. Like we can allow it more. Then we can allow what other people are trying to give us to come in more. And it all comes back to the crux of what I am or am not giving to myself. And so then I'm just starting to put this together after years of doing this work, that it's really identity work. It's healing the way we see ourselves to truth, not overinflated. I would never say, well, I was there every second and I was a perfect parent, and I'm talking about truth. Two things can coexist at the same time, and I was both. I was both.
Yeah.
And when I allow that to happen, I'm not just the mom whose kid killed himself. It's different. It's way more dynamic and way more healing, and it's truth.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. And I love that you talked about it as identity work and self-worth and all of those things. And I think that is a really big block for a lot of women, is honoring that.
It It is. And that's what I couldn't get them to get in the beginning of the journaling. That's the piece that I didn't understand, that that's what I was doing, but I wasn't sure how to show them how. And then when this process came through, it was like, oh, this is what we do. We do this, then we look at it, then we rewrite it to the truth, and then we rewire through practice, which is
Yeah, and I'm also very familiar with Byron Katie's
Oh,
work, and it is really we use it. I work with horses in my coaching practice, and I love that. Is that true? Is that is asking that is that the truth? And I love watching her because she is just so masterful, obviously,
of
because she
course.
developed that process. But it's just a really powerful way to bring people back to themselves
Certainly.
and understand, no, that's not the truth. It's something that I've derived to be true to me because it works for me or whatever it is. It's not necessarily the truth.
Well, I've
So
found,
it's
like,
interesting.
not only do we distort, I don't know that
Mhm.
distortion of events is the worst part that we've done to ourselves. Naturally, just humanity is what we do. I'm not blaming anything on us as humans, but that the worst part, I think, is that we distort, or that's not the worst part. The missing link is the rest of the story.
Mhm.
And if we're going on Byron Katie, like, what else could be true?
Mhm.
Right? Because an event happens, we create a story. Often the story is just filtered through our own crap. And it's so distorted, but like, we haven't even looked for alternative options. And then, say, in the case of your own motherhood, one of the things I remember when my kids were really little, and my son was fairly difficult from young. My daughter, by the way, was walking the park easy, self-driven, self-motivated, straight A's, all the things. Then I have my little boy who made me work really hard every day, all day long. And so I would go to work, and I had this boss who I really love. He was such a great guy and a good person in my life at the time. And he said, and I would go to work and I would talk about how Megan was just naturally like this and she XYZ. And then I would talk about how it was my parenting that made Quentin like he was. And I remember him saying,
Mm.
you don't get all the credit for who he is and none of the credit for who she is. And I feel like that's just a good example. Like, because
Yeah.
we are taught to own the bad things and minimize the good things in life. And that the
Yeah.
magic and the medicine, the thing we're waiting for is for us to give us credit for who we are and where we've been and what we've already accomplished and already overcome. And that might be just a traumatic childhood. The fact that you're even
Mhm.
still trying when your foundation was screwed to begin with is pretty miraculous, because a lot of people ain't
Yeah.
trying.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I feel like, that's my soapbox. and I've uniquely found a way, or allowed a way to come through me, that I share with as many people as possible, because I I just can't even. I can imagine a world in which teenage girls understand how to do this, and they aren't 30 and 40 and 50 looking back at their life. They're living in real time and examining their choices, and they're loving
Mm.
themselves through the hard parts of life, through all of it.
Yeah. And I think that that's really important. And I won't say there's not enough of that out there, but, I mean, just even, in my generation growing up, and, there's just certain things that and now with the internet and, social media, it's even worse. I
I
mean,
be-
it was always like, we have to live up to that. Oh my God, there's no way that that's going to happen. But, everybody's got these perfect lives and and it's devastating to kids.
it
They
is.
just, it's like, oh,
And
it's just in your face
and if
constantly
you
now.
happen to live in a family that promotes therapy and has the
Mm,
resources to get you there, it's
yeah.
still, and I'm a fan of therapy. It was my
Mhm.
only tool for a very long time, but if that is true, you're still only being able to process on scene, and when I really started regularly journaling, I remember my therapist saying, Marie, your journaling has become your meditation. You have allowed yourself to pull out enough that you could now receive back what it is that you're needing. Like in meditation, I like to call them uploads now because I kind of have this image that
Instead of
our
downloads.
spirit is my spirit, my Marie, my non-physical Marie is living in my body. And so when something's coming, it's coming from inside of me versus out there. But I've also, stay tuned because that might change in another, we're always hopefully evolving. But I feel like this process, and this is not the only process, right? But I feel like what I'm doing is another way where if you are able to go to therapy or whatever, you can metabolize it by repetition on purpose and accelerate whatever it is that you're working on.
So you've talked about, your kind of dream for the future, so to speak, of how young women could, embody this practice now and not have to be doing it when they're in their 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever, and undoing all of the things that have been done. How do you see that happening? Do you have an initiative or something that you're trying to put out there?
I've been trying to work on that because we also have to deal with the delicacy of young women and how brutal it could be. So the vast majority of the work I do is collectively with women in a room together because the vibration and the validation is unprecedented. Like it's so people like, I want to work with you one-on-one and I'm here for that. But if they will do group work, you get the benefit of everybody's work. However, we're talking about mature women who aren't going to go blast somebody on the internet with the material that they've shared, right? There's a safety concern, I believe, with young women. You can't let them open up their heart and soul in front of other women, other young women. So right now I am working on, I have a woman who is she's huge into the Girl Scout community. She was my daughter's Girl Scout leader until, my daughter was in Girl Scouts, so she was like a junior in high school. And she and I have met multiple times to bring some of this in the way that wouldn't be dangerous and start to teach them and maybe move towards some one-on-one. I'm not sure, but that is for right now, the projection of where I've opened a doorway. But I believe that when that is ready to come to fruition, those opportunities are going to kind of show up. And the right person, I've never talked about this on a podcast, so the right person is going to see it, hear it, and it's going to, ring a bell, I think. But, for now, I'm just understanding that as we heal as women, we teach our daughters and our sisters and sometimes our mothers how to look at life differently, to process differently, to give themselves the credit that they deserve and to allow the full picture of their badassery to
thank you for bringing that in.
Come
Yes,
into
absolutely.
Zoom and allow that version of themselves to run their life instead of the 10-year-old wounded self, which is a whole other conversation.
A whole other episode.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I was just curious because it sounds like you're very passionate about that, and I completely understand it. And it's hard, like you said, for young women to open up because of the fear of being shamed or whatever. It's nasty. Kids are nasty. I hate to say it, but growing up and getting bullied and picked on and whatever else, and now it's just exponentially
worse. I do not envy these mamas raising babies in this tech age at all.
No.
At all.
No, ma'am. All right. Wow. We covered a lot of ground there. Thank you so much for sharing all of that beautiful information. And I'd love to, We talked about the Nautilus Way, and I loved how it just kind of came to you like, oh, wait, we have to do this. They have to understand why it's not just writing and how it's processing and all of the things. As we're wrapping up here, do you have anything? Do you have any retreats coming up? What would you like to leave my listeners with today?
Wow. Well, one
A
thing
couple of
I
things.
hope people hear is that all of the answers that you've ever been looking for are already inside of you because we look outside of ourselves for all of it. We're consistently thinking if we have the right partner or if we would have had the right parents or whatever, if our best friend would show up when we need her, all the things, right? That when you become that person for yourself, every single relationship in your life will be altered and it's fairly magical. So that's just like a piece that I think gets embedded every time somebody might hear it. Um, so that's one. But as far as my retreats coming up, I just yesterday decided on all the dates for the fall. So I'm having
Yay.
2 women's empowerment retreats, which are uh, for women who are dealing with anything besides the loss of a child. So I do have women who come to those that have deep grief, and we can hold that. And usually more than one is at every retreat. But I also have 2 that I'm planning I picked the dates for that are exclusively for mothers who've lost a child because that container needs to be tighter. If you put a mother who's lost a child in a room with someone who's, let's just call it anything, the mother is going to pull back her grief to protect the room. And the person who's going through other really substantial things are going to feel like, but it's not that. So they'll pull back. And I've learned that we need that separate. So I have 2 of each that is scheduled for the fall. And here at the beach at my beach house. And those can be found on my website, which is crews.com under the retreats tab. And I also offer a free journal jumpstart guide, which is like a workshop I did. It's a
Nice.
video and it kind of guides you through the beginning. Like where do you start? And I do a little breathwork meditation training in there. So also on my website, they can just hit the button for that. It's on the front page. And another thing is if somebody's heard something and they really think, I really think I want more information, but I'd rather have a conversation about it. I'm pretty open to hopping on a call. I really am passionate about all of this. And I always learn something from every call, whether they work with me or not. So there's also, work under the work with me tab you can fill out to do a quick consultation, and that's free. So yeah,
Love it.
yeah.
I love it. Those are all really great things. And the links for all of those will be in the show notes down below. And for those of you listening, if any of this or all of this resonated with you, or you know someone that it will resonate with, please share this episode with a friend. And, rate us, review, whatever, all of the things, because I love having conversations like this with my guests and bringing this information to you. So that's it for today. Marie, thank you so much for being on the show. And until next week, be well, and I will see you on the next episode of Midlife Strategies for Badass Women.